Good morning, I'm WaywornWyrm, and welcome to my channel. And welcome back to Space is Wide and Good Friends Are Too Few, Episode 11, The State of the Navy. As spring turned into summer 2103, Rear Admiral Lillie McQuay met with her senior staff. The Earth Federation Fleet headquarters was located on the shores of Lake Michigan, and Lillie's office had a commanding view of the lake. It had been almost a year since the Battle of Ross 128, in which the entire Earth Federation Space Navy was almost destroyed for what they would have imagined to be relatively light losses for the Anarch Zeta aliens. The Earth defense line was sitting about 20 million kilometers off of the jump point, and it had been quiet except for a small probe by the aliens in late 2102. Lillie looked at the assembled men and women and began. Where are we? Let's go over the entire state of affairs for the EFSN. Rear Admiral, lower half, Michael Cape began. As you are well aware, the Bulldog and the Chihuahua, the two Enterprise-class gravitational survey ships, have been long finished with their survey of the Sol system. We are awaiting the building of a Fletcher-class jump ship to start bringing them to other systems. We are aware that the unexpected conflict in Anarch Zeta has put that on hold for now, given that Anarch Zeta was the prime target for exploration and colonization before the discovery of the aliens there. The Buzzard and the Canary, the Spruance-class geological survey vessels, have finished surveying all the planets and moons of the Sol system, and are currently working on the asteroids and comets in system, but that will most likely take them a few more years. I would request that we consider building 2 more Spruance-class ships once we finish the Fletcher. The sooner we can get geological surveys of systems we are doing gravitational surveys in, the sooner we can have a full picture of where to colonize. Clearly, the head of surveying for the fleet was primarily concerned with colonization. Lillie was also pretty sure that Michael was positioning himself to take over her job when she finally finished. Michael was the highest-ranking Rear Admiral, lower half, and based on seniority alone, he was clearly the best candidate. Captain Willie Pizzilli was next, given that he was the next highest-ranking person who had a firm portfolio. Rear Admiral lower half Elliot Litz was also there, but he was the head of fighter operations, and at the moment, fighters were something that were possibly in the future, but nowhere near even the planning stages yet. The technology for space-based fighters just simply didn't exist. Captain Willie Pesley was the head of logistics. The big news of this year is the Buffalo, our Portland-class fuel harvester, launched and is on its way to Uranus to start harvesting sorium from the planet and start converting it into fuel. A second one, the Bumblebee, has been laid down and will join it next year. We are also starting to add another slip to the McQuay Designs Inc. shipyard that is building the Portland-class ships. We have 2 Kohlers, the Oliver H. Perry class, being built, and they'll be finished in about 11 months. They'll be standing by to refill the missiles for the Earth defense platforms as needed. We are also having 240 ordnance factories that we have building missiles. With the addition of missiles into our Navy, logistics is getting a lot harder. Captain Sung Smithwick was next, the head of communications. There isn't much to report, I must say. We can communicate with the Anarch Zeta aliens now, but the whole being at war thing and being in different systems pretty much prevents that. The best thing we've created over the last year is using jump engines to send packets of data through a jump point to then go to a destination on the other side. Now, instead of needing a ship on both sides of a jump point, we only need a ship on the side that the data must go through, and then in the destination system, it can get on its own. Captain Benny Lauenbach, the head of intelligence, went next. Well, there isn't much left for me to talk about, so I'm going to talk about our future for the war with the Anarch Zeta aliens and what we need based on all reports I've gathered. Right now, while we have the technology space station-based missile launcher to launch missiles the size of the Earth defense missiles every 30 seconds, a ship-based system, given the differences between stations and ships, can at best reload those missiles in a minute. Dr. Dexter Boschart has been working on it since before the Great Endeavor, as it's beginning to be called, and he believes he can cut down the time by about a third by probably late next month. With his optimizations, we can get the size of the missile we currently have reloaded every 40 seconds, or we could go with one a third smaller and have it reload every 30 seconds. Those changes should also bring the reload time of our ship-based anti-missile missile launchers down to 5 seconds from the 10 they're at. We'll need a speed of at least 3,070 kilometers a second to deny at least the Swiftsure and the Dreadnought classes from being able to dictate the range of engagements. Preferably speeds of 7,020 kilometers a second, so we can dictate engagement ranges against even a Trafalgar-class ship. We will need decent weight of fire to ensure that we don't run out of missiles before we destroy their ships, though their fleet composition seems to tend to single ships engaging. The Oliver H. Perrys will help with that between battles. We'll need to improve our sensor technology, because our sensors are way too large to be viable on combat ships while still having the ranges we need. We should also look into improving our jump engines. The missile cruisers we will be making will most likely be larger than our current ships, and our jump engines have to be 20% of the entire ship, which ends up taking a lot of space just to be able to jump. We could easily end up with another jump-capable lead ship like the Lexington, where it is blind by itself. In short, with all of our difficulties, and with current technology, I think it will be several years before we really have the chance to combat the Anarch Zeta aliens. Commander Stefan Castilla, the head of operations, nodded his assent. I agree with Captain Lauenbach here. Right now, I think we should be focused on expanding through the Sol system and even start colonizing places that might be subpar options to start expanding the human diaspora. It would also help with the economy, which I might say is doing rather poorly due to the massive costs associated with our expanding fleet. As long as the Oliver H. Perrys keep the Earth defense platforms resupplied, we can essentially ignore that junk point. Those platforms are built to last 25 years between resupply, so they'll be fine there until 21-27. We're going through a phase of rebuilding right now, and it will be a year or two before we're capable of the types of operations we did before the disaster that was Anarch Zeta. We're also expanding in several other ways as we had scheduled before the war began. We are simply missing all the deadlines because we have been so focused on our survival for the past year. Lastly, all eyes in the conference room turned to Lieutenant Commander Jason Kwan, the head of public affairs. He shrugged for a moment. There's not too much to say. the people of Earth feel well protected by the fleet and trust that we are doing what we can do. I don't think it has sunk in how close to total disaster we were after Anarch Zeta if they had capitalized on what they had had. The administration is fine with us, although they're starting to focus more on the upcoming elections than what we are doing. Lillie nodded to each person in turn. Thank you. This is really going to help me going forward with what we need to do. I'm trying to get more assets for us, but we still have a bottleneck with how many construction factories we have. The Federation is trying very hard to rebuild its industrial base after last century, and it's going okay. Lieutenant Commander Cletus Cuomo stood on the surface of the butterscotch-colored planet and dug his foot into the sand a bit as he looked around at the dull, boring landscape through his helmet. He wanted nothing more than to spit on the ground of this hellhole. Well, at least he would only be visiting off and on for probably only a few months. He turned back to his ship, the Brooks, a North Carolina-class colony ship, and walked back into the airlock. Once it fully cycled, he took off his helmet and placed it in the locker just inside the airlock and quickly made his way to the main hold. As the captain of the ship, he was very easily able to make it from one area of his ship to another, but he had to admit that the 38% of Earth gravity helped. He stood on a gangplank overlooking the hold as his people helped the colonists out of their cryo chambers. The trip was only 4 hours and 10 days each way, with a 2-hour and 2-minute defrost cycle. But with 50,000 berths, that was a lot of food and water and air. Not to mention waste that they didn't have to deal with if they just froze the people for a couple of days. His crew of 145 were more than enough to have life support for if they didn't need more. Cletus was the commanding officer of the Colony Task Group, a group of 4 Carolina-class colony ships that were dropping off 200,000 colonists at a time to Mars. Competing with them were the 4 Kunst-class freighters who were dropping off and creating cities all over the planet for the colonists to live in. Currently, Mars had enough infrastructure to accommodate 6 million colonists, and with his first trip, there would be 200,000. He was pretty sure that his task group would never catch up to the Kunst guys unless they started hauling stuff elsewhere. While the Kunst was bringing infrastructure to set up a decent human presence on Mars, the colonists would be setting up farms and settling in and working on getting everything set. When the Kunst had brought enough infrastructure for 5 million colonists, it would shift to bringing more mining equipment and factories to start Mars becoming a fully functioning planet. Cletus and his men would start supplying colonists for a while once the planet hit about 4 million, in order to ensure that things did not become too crowded while Earth created more infrastructure. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Space is Wide and Good Friends Are Too Few. Make sure to tune in tomorrow for my Friday show. Thank you.